Hello and welcome to those of you here live. So happy you could come and very impressed that you're here on time. And for those of you watching the replay, yay. Thank you for taking the time to do that. We had 67 people register, which I was so psyched about. And with that, since I'm trying to keep this to about 30, 40 minutes at the most, given the nature of the population and topic, I'm going to ask you to all put your questions in the chat. And if we don't get to them, I have a follow-up plan to get to some of the questions answered for you if they haven't been touched upon during our time together now. So let's start with some questions for you. It's kind of like a game of never have I ever. Before that, if you are here live, we're going to use the chat. And if you are on replay, I want you to get out a piece of paper and pen. Doing things in your head with the same head that is your ADHD head is not efficient and often not effective. This is partially because the working memory in ADHD people tends to be weaker. So this can be your first tip of the day. You've got to get things outside of your head and get them on paper or somewhere in a visual fashion, visual representation of abstract concepts, So the writing of your thoughts, for instance, or the visualization of another abstract concept for most of us. Time. People have clocks all over their house, right? Watches, that's a visual representation of time. Same with the writing. By the way, the color changing clocks, that's the way to go. I will give you a link of that in my follow-up resources. So we need to externalize. We have to externalize the abstract concepts because that frees up cognitive resources, which then when you have more cognitive resources, you have more space for clarity, you have more energy. An old school writing with the pen and paper is more effective than typing on a device due to how our brains process information. When you write by hand, you're engaging more areas of your brain. It involves fine motor skills. It helps strengthen neural connections, and it helps with memory retention. And also, writing can also create a more focused, tactile, sensory experience where it helps you to organize your thoughts better, helps you stay grounded, essentially. All right. So we got all that going. So back to the questions. Again, for those of us here live, even though I just gave that tangent around writing on paper, good ADHD style side note tangent. You are putting your answers in the chat. If you have paper and pen at home, that's completely fine. You can do that too. Those on replay, you do the paper thing. So here are my questions. 1, put a yes in the chat or on your paper if you have ever spent 20 minutes looking for your keys, phone, or wallet only to find them in your pocket or your hand. Put a yes on the paper or in the chat if you've ever had 67 browser tabs open because you thought you might read them later, even though some of them are from 3 or 4 weeks ago. Put a yes in the chat if you have organized piles that you completely plan to sort someday. Put a yes in the chat if you have ever texted or called saying you're running late and leaving right now when you're actually texting from your bed or your kitchen table about to speed dress and then go look for your missing car keys. Oh, I see a few yeses in there. Put a yes in the chat if you get at least 20 emails a day, sometimes to 3 different accounts from people whose freebie PDF or quiz you signed up for at some point. Put a yes in the chat or on your paper if you've ever put something in a safe place and then couldn't find it for 6 months. Put a yes in the chat if you've ever made a detailed grocery list and then left it on the kitchen counter. I just did that last week. It was a good one too. I didn't forget anything on the list, but I forgot lots of things in the store subsequently. Put a yes on your paper or in the chat if you've ever double or triple booked yourself and didn't realize it until 2 minutes before the meeting. Put a yes on your paper or in the chat if you've ever stopped mid-sentence because you completely forgot where you were going with it. This is one of my favorite. I just did this last night. Put a yes in the chat or on your paper if you've ever washed the same load of laundry 3 times because you forgot to take it out. And then put a yes in the chat or on your paper if you've ever planned to just check one thing online and you don't remember what that thing is, but 3 hours later, you know exactly how and what materials you need to build a tiny house in Costa Rica. Okay, so I see a lot of yeses, and all of those have been yeses myself. You are in the right place. If you answered yes to a number of these questions, you're definitely here with your people. We get it. So the next 20 minutes or so, at least, and you get to be with people who get it. You don't have to explain anything. You don't have to mask anything. You just get to be present, and be yourself, right? Because so many of us ADHD women struggle in constantly juggling the masking as we're trying to tackle responsibilities, motivation, procrastination, feeling like we're in a perpetual state of chaos. And the perpetual state of chaos has us living in a perpetual fight, flight, or freeze mode, putting out fires all the time. That kind of stress leads to burnout, and very commonly for ADHD women, to a deep, deep sense of shame. Put a yes in the chat if you've ever experienced that deep sense of shame because you're late again, because you didn't do the thing again, etc. So let's do another quick share if you feel comfortable here. Write it down on your paper or put it in the chat, as I said, if you feel comfortable. What is the one thing, or a thing that feels most chaotic in your life right now? It might be more than one thing, but you can just put a word. It can be work. It could be anything. I see work. I see building my business, holiday. Okay, there's many different examples. So let me share a couple of examples of my own where how I even got here. So about not here today, but to specializing as an ADHD coach to relating to all of you. So about 5 years ago, I was in the height of a burnout period of my life. And of course, during that point, all the ADHD symptoms went wild. So here is a picture of my car parked across the street from my house. This circle is surrounding, in the passenger seat of my car is a garbage bag. And that garbage bag was filled with donation clothes that drove around with me as the passenger in my front seat for 2 months at least. During that time, my husband noticed one day that Google Maps happened to capture my dysfunction into perpetuity. And I felt kind of happy to see that it disappeared. They retook the picture kind of recently, I think last year, but that was up there for a while. Not that I think anyone was looking, but I knew that Google Maps had caught me. The mask was off. So this is my Amazon cart. You can't see it. This is not my current cart. It's like my save for later cart. And there are 598 items that are saved for later. Some of them have probably been saved for later for years. That kind of goes along with the whole tabs, save for later, lists, folders that I save. And, do you ever really go back? And then this is not me. This is someone I saw in a Facebook group one time that I was in. And I just thought it was the funniest thing I had seen. It really made me laugh. She apparently is not the Chandler family, but she forgot to change the bottom of her card. So they sent out all these Christmas cards from Happy Holidays to the Chandler family. I thought that was amazing. So my goal today is that you can leave here or finish your replay with a couple of concrete tips you can do to start living your life day to day without as much chaos. I'm not going to promise you're going to see this. There's going to be rainbows and unicorns, and then you're just going to be basically cured of ADHD symptoms. But I am going to promise you I can give you a couple concrete tips of things you can start doing today that can help you take some chaos out of your life. And I'm going to ask you for the remainder of our time here, whether you're live or you're on replay, if you haven't already, to please give yourself the gift of being present. Silence your notifications, close your other tabs or windows or whatever else is on in the background, or take us into a new separate window on your screen. And a bare minimum ADHD management tip that I can start with is When you are imagining this less chaotic life, the first thing you should do when you get off of this webinar, and I'm telling you to do it right after you get off of the webinar, we all know it's not going to happen. Shut off all the notifications on your phone, all of the dings, all of the bings, the numbers that say you have 1,000 texts you haven't read. Take all of that off, because every time you look at it, it's just an overwhelming reminder of all the shit you have to do, all the shit you didn't do. Overwhelming. Take off the numbers, take off the sounds, take off your social media apps. Turn your phone to grayscale. I will send you information. It's not intuitive of how to do that. You have to go into accessibility and then into display. It's not just the regular display on some phones. Putting your phone on grayscale makes it so boring. It's so much less interesting to scroll. If you haven't already taken your social media apps off your phone, that's another addition that you can do to this decluttering of your notifications and things. All of these things can help you give you presence back in your life. And the extra time that you will not scroll, probably particularly because of the grayscale, it's just so uninviting. So what I will tell you will most likely happen with the grayscale is you will at some point take a picture, and you'll want to see the picture, how it came out in color. And then you'll put your phone out of grayscale, and then you will get into more distraction over time. And then at some point you'll realize, oh, my phone's back in color, and you'll put it back to grayscale again until the next time. And there will be a next time. And that is okay, because we are not looking for perfection. Perfectionism is a huge issue with us neurodiverse people. So for today, whenever you end up back off of grayscale, instead of focusing on the fact that you only did grayscale for one day, it's a day more than you had done it before. Celebrate that you did grayscale for one day, because we have to celebrate the small wins. Because when you start to change your thoughts and you start to focus on what did go well and what did get done today, it changes it'll change your life. Because that's another tip that I want to give you tonight. Last thing you do before you go to bed tonight, and regularly, jot down 3 things which did get done. We all have our to-do list of like 100 million things that didn't get done. Jot down the things that did get done. I cannot remember where I even originally heard this. I don't know if it was like a Mel Robbins type of podcast, or if it was an ADHD training thing that I read. I don't remember. It was a wonderful tool though, because we all have this to-do lists. We all have those things that we know what we didn't get done, and we flog ourselves for that, especially us who consistently procrastinate things. So write down 3 things that you did get done today, and don't write it on your phone. You shouldn't even you write it on a piece of paper with a pen next to your bed. And so I want you to start that tonight. So far you've been we have the following: taking off the notifications, putting your phone on grayscale. And now I know I'm inundating you with things, but these are all simple things you can do that will help so much. Starting tonight, the last thing you do before bed, the last thoughts you have, that you write on a paper next to your bed, not in your phone, because your phone should be in another room, or at least across the room at a minimum, because you'll sleep so much better if you don't end up picking up the phone to look at one more thing and start scrolling and then have the blue light in your face. I sleep so much better when I put my phone downstairs. I probably do it 50% of the time, listen to my own advice about that. And when I do, it's good advice. So I want you to write 3 things which did get done today, or went well at a minimum, because all of us have the endless to-do lists. And often many of us feel shitty because we didn't get enough done, or we had all these plans to get things done and then nothing got done at all. And we say things to ourselves like, why can't I just get my shit together? What's wrong with me? And none of that's going to motivate you. A lot of us, I wouldn't say we all, subconsciously try to shame ourselves into action, and it does not work. It's never worked for me, at least. And it's paralyzing instead. So I want you to, every night, 3 things you did get done. And it can be minor, tiny things. It can be you made your bed. We're not talking military corners or hospital corners or anything like that. We're talking about literally yanking up the blanket on the way out of bed. Great. You already have one thing on your list. I yank up my covers every day. And sometimes that's on my list. Little wins. You know who is great at celebrating little wins? People in 12-step programs. So those people, and by those people, I mean myself included, I grew up basically in 12-step programs. In 12-step meetings, people really celebrate the little wins. People, they raise their hands and they share and they're like, I paid my bills for the first time in a year. And everybody's like, yay. Or I brush my teeth every day this week. Yay. And everyone's clapping and cheering and yay. And it's funny, right? People cheering and celebrating and accomplishing what are generally societally expected adulting things to do. But that's where they have the key to this whole thing. This whole thing, and this is the part of what I notified in my flyer for this class. In my flyer for this class, I mentioned this often overlooked key to ADHD management. So this is the part of this, my holistic framework I mentioned. The title of this talk is From Clarity to Chaos, a holistic three-pronged model for managing your mind and for women, executives, and entrepreneurs to manage their mind and their life. Doesn't matter what the title is. The fact is, the holistic model is this. It is mind, body, and spirit. This is the spirit piece that I'm going to get into right now. That three-pronged framework for ADHD management, the mind, body, spirit. I say it's three-pronged because in our society, we view these things separately. However, it isn't. Everything is connected. Everything. You have to manage all three of these things because they're actually only one thing. And one of the biggest keys to it all, the key that enables people to celebrate general adulting life things, that whether it's 12-step program people, whether it's ADHD people, the key is acceptance. These people in 12-step programs have accepted the fact that whether they should have been able to do these things, when they were in their active addictions, they weren't doing them. They weren't brushing their teeth. They weren't paying their bills. They weren't present for their families. And accepting the truth of their realities allowed them to make clear, conscious choices to do things differently. The more time that you spend trying to operate as you think you should and not as you actually are operating, you are perpetuating your struggle. Now, some of you are addicted to the struggle. I have been there. I am over it very relatively recently, if I'm going to be honest with myself. But you are perpetuating your struggling by not accepting how you're actually behaving at this point and what your situations actually are. And this is a huge key, the biggest key in managing your ADHD life. Once you start to accept the reality of your situation for exactly as it is, you have the energy, the choice, and the accountability to start and think and behave differently and then manage your life differently. You have the space at that point, and pretty much only at that point, in my opinion, to be able to be different. And I'm going to repeat that because I think it's the absolute most important thing I can say in this time. More important than specific time management things that I could give you here. Only once you start to accept the reality of your situations and behaviors for exactly as they are, will you start to have the energy, choice, and accountability to start to think and behave differently and manage your life differently. ADHD or not ADHD, I promise you, I'm going to give you an example that I love to give because it became so clear to me when I was in it. So when I was in college and grad school and basically my whole academic life as a young kid, I was very fortunate because academics came pretty easy. So when it came to college and grad school, I had a gazillion papers. Every paper, I would start the research for the paper. Obviously, it wasn't very thorough research around midnight the night before. And I'd be stressed the fuck out of my mind the night before, up all night, writing this paper. I'd get it done, 8 a.m. I'd race to class 10 blocks away. I'd hand in the paper. I'd get an A. I'd feel this huge sense of relief. And then I would do the same thing the next time. And it was so stressful. It wasn't even just so stressful that night. It was so stressful for the weeks and weeks before when I couldn't even be present for what I was like. If I was out with friends or if I was at work or in class, I wasn't really present because the whole time, everything, I couldn't fully enjoy anything because I was always like, oh, I should be home writing this paper. Oh, I haven't done this yet. I haven't done this yet. Oh, I'm going to do it. Oh, now I didn't do it again. And it wasn't, I couldn't be present anywhere in my life. So I'd be stressed about having to do this paper, whatever paper it was every time, for weeks on end. Then I would be extra stressed the night before. I'd have this sense of relief and I would do the same thing. And every single time I did it for years, I'd say to myself, self, if you would just do this 1 hour a day for 10 or 11 days, you wouldn't have this kind of stress. And I'd say to myself, oh yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that next time, knowing in my heart I was not going to do that next time. And I would proceed on to not do it again. Until one day, I cannot tell you why, all of a sudden one day, this my second year of grad school, I had this thought come to my mind, an honest thought. And I thought, you know what? I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do this 1 hour a day for 10 days in a row. I'm never going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be stressed out of my mind the night before. I'm going to do all of it in 10 hours and I'm going to race a class. I'm going to hand it in and I'm going to get a good grade. And that changed everything. What it did was it cut out the shame and the voice of shame that would follow me around for all those weeks when I wasn't doing it, needing to be doing it. There was no more, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get my shit together? That mantra had become my narrative in life. And so, yes, I was still doing the paper the night before, and I'm not going to lie, the night before, still stressful. But what changed was that the 3 weeks before that, when I previously hadn't been present in any other area of my life, because in the back of my mind, I needed to do this paper and I wouldn't do it. And then I felt shitty about wasting time and not doing it. That all went away. Imagine for a moment that you can have all of that go away by being honest with yourself about the reality of your behavior. And without all of that, I had more energy to connect with people in my life. I had more energy to work. I had more energy to do other tasks that I wasn't generally doing before either. Picking up my house or something. I had more energy because that was all. I wasn't spending all that time on shame and what's wrong with me. So I know some of you in here right now tell yourself, for instance, that you can't spend the time to do something fun, right? Say you like some TV show. You can't do that because you have so much work you need to get done, or there's so much to do for the kids, or you have some kind of task at home that you haven't done in weeks and weeks and weeks, but now you can't possibly take time for yourself because you got to do this task. And what you end up doing is you're so burnt out because you're not doing anything that is fun in your life at all, even for like 10 minutes. If you have kids, you get your kids to bed. If you don't have kids, you come, home from an exhausting day of work, or you get off of, whatever you're doing, and you end up sitting on your couch sitting in front of your couch, or sitting on your couch or sitting in front of your computer, going down the research rabbit hole with how big's a pygmy seahorse or whatever thought comes to your mind. And then you feel horrible when you come up for air 2 hours later, your work's not done. And now you're irritable and annoyed at yourself and everyone else in your house. You'd be much better off if you were just truthful and honest with yourself. You said, I'm not going to get that done right now. I'm exhausted. I'm going to watch a show that I really enjoy. And you know what happens then? You get to enjoy the show. And then because you did something enjoyable, your cup gets a little more filled. And then you have energy to tackle some small task. Small wins. Celebrate the small wins. Small wins are actually big wins, because when you start to acknowledge the small wins, as we were talking about before, what did I get done today? You watching a show you actually enjoyed counts as a win. Why? Because you watched it with the intention to enjoy it, and you did that. And it was very different than watching it out of procrastinity. So I don't know if you are aware of this. Motivation for ADHD brains comes after the action, not before. But you will be waiting forever for motivation to come. There's lots of research and books and things on that you can read. or you can come to one of my workshops about that type of thing in the future. But it comes through action, motivation does. This might be true for most people. I have no idea, but actually, I do know. I mean, that is true for most people. But it is so extra true, if that can be a thing, for ADHD people. So I'm going to give you another personal example. I have always hated running. I hated it. Early in my relationship, my now husband suggested we start jogging because it's easy. You can throw your shoes on, go out the door. We had just come off of like a 3-month Equinox membership where we went for basically $500 a time because we went twice. Anyway, we start running and we start with 4 miles out of the gate. And I hated it. He would say, "Oh, you're going to get to a point where you love it and you just feel like you could run forever." That did never happen. And then, by the way, my nervous system would go into fight or flight mode, and I'd have a panic attack in the middle of Central Park pretty much every time we ran. But it was early in our relationship, and I wanted to be active girl and fun girl and fit girl because my husband was like always very active and fit. Um, and and I wanted to, make sure he still liked me and impress him at the early stage. I mean, I still want to impress him, but anyway, I'm digressing. So that didn't last, the running. Fast forward 16 years. My sons have a friend on their flag football team who decides to train to be able to run a mile in some amount of time. Okay. They decide they're going to do that too. And I decide I'm going to go with them. I have been having a goal for this year of being a more present mom. Starting 5 years ago when I got really burnt out, I didn't show up for a number of years in the way that I wanted to for my family. And this year I was like, I'm going to be more present. So this was a way I could be present. I could support them, do it with them, have time with them, and start getting more movement for myself, which was another goal for my year. Now, on a side note, I'm disrupting my own story right now. I just want to say that another good ADHD tip is accountability, body doubling. Partnering is hugely helpful, right? This for anyone, but particularly for us as ADHD people, there's something I'm not going to get into the whole science of it right now, but there's something of body doubling. It adds this extra energy where this person's doing it, so you're able to do it too. And if you don't know what body doubling is, the term, it's this idea that you and somebody else, you do your own individual work together. It could be together online. There's even apps and companies where you can just sign up and go, you work online, that person's working online, you have the camera on or whatever. And then, or in person, with people that or even go to a cafe. Accountability, partnering, and body doubling, that's all hugely helpful for us. So we start running. And the other piece that was hugely helpful was that it was, instead of running 4 miles now, I'm running 1 mile, breaking things down into the smallest manageable pieces that I could manage. Now, I knew I could manage a mile because I remember doing as a kid the presidential physical fitness test. I don't, if I'm aging myself, put a yes in the chat if you remember that. I see a couple yeses, or on your paper. So I knew I could do a mile, right? I did that when I was 10 years old. So we often struggle with consistency as ADHD people because we thrive on novelty. We get that dopamine hit from any newness. That's why I tell people, even if like you sit down at your computer every day, can't concentrate, go try working from another room, go try working from a different desk, different table, go to a cafe. That the newness is what we get that dopamine hit from that, and that's very useful for our brains. So now we start doing jog for junk to kick off our mile run. Jog for junk, by the way, is our family term for you get to have a baked good for breakfast. We jog to the store in Saltaire, in this town in Fire Island. From our town, Bear Harbor, it's about a mile, and you get to have junk if you do the jog that day. So we start doing jog for junk, and I find out I'm doing it with them. I'm not eating the junk, and not that you care. And I find out I can do a mile. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. And that is, I changed my mindset. of I hate running to I'm going to do this in support of my kids. And then it started to feel good. Now I have no desire to run 4 miles still, but because I don't think that would feel good, but maybe it will someday. I don't know. But it feels good to run a mile. I like how I feel after. My head feels clear. And because it feels good after, I am motivated and have been for the past 6 months to do it regularly. This is amazing for me because I've only been consistent at a few things in my whole life. And now I'm able to be consistent because it feels good, it makes, because I like how I feel after. Sometimes I have weeks where I miss a few days. I do it about 4 to 5 times a week average. And usually historically, that's where it all goes to shit. Now, because I have formed a habit by doing a small, manageable thing that makes me feel good, when I miss a few days, I actually want to get back to it. I have the subconscious memory. I did it enough times. I have the subconscious memory of the fact that it's going to feel really good after. And that's what we seek as ADHD people. We seek the feel good. We don't just always know how to get it. We get it from things like scrolling our phones, which gives us immediate, quick dopamine hits all the time, but becomes addictive. It doesn't feel good after. So I'm going to jump back for a minute because there are a lot of people registered here from the registration form who noted that they're just finding out now that ADHD is a thing, or that they found out later in life. So I just want to mention back in terms of the acceptance thing, I was just thinking. Oftentimes when people first realize they have ADHD, or people get a diagnosis for ADHD, especially women getting diagnosed later in life, it's very, very validating. I don't think we have to get stuck in labels, but occasionally labels give us a name for something, right? We can name this way of being that has caused so much havoc in our lives. And that, the naming of it, ADHD, that's what this is. The naming of it is often so validating. It wasn't that I just can't get my shit together, or that I was just lazy or dumb or whatever. But what happens to some people after that is they start to feel really sad and angry about the fact that their life could have been potentially different, potentially easier, had they have known this information, or had their parents have known this information earlier. So many people then, if their parents are still alive at that point, depending on how like they got diagnosed, go to their parents. Did you ever suspect this? And I'd say at least 50% of women I know who get diagnosed as adults, this is not an evidence-based study, this is my anecdotal thought of how many people, but I'd say at least 50% of the women I know who get diagnosed as adults ask their parents, who say, oh yeah, but you did well in school, so we didn't do anything about it. Or yes, but we didn't want to put you on medication and there really weren't any other options, so we just didn't. And that's sad and angering. And you are allowed to feel sad and angry. That right there is grief. And if you do not go through the grief, just like your day-to-day life, if you choose to try to pretend you shouldn't feel grief, or you shouldn't, this shouldn't affect you, your parents were just doing the best they could. Yes, they were. And it affects you. It's not a but, it's an and. And if you choose to continue to strive for a way of being other than what the reality is for you, your ADHD symptoms will most likely get worse. They're going to get worse. It's a mind, body, spirit solution because it's all connected. And people struggling with grief are going to have worse ADHD symptoms anyway. They're going to have increased symptoms. There's all kinds of reasons for that: cortisol, dopamine deficiency during grief, etc. And this is true for any kind of grief or loss. It doesn't have to be just this loss of an opportunity of a life you might have had, but also a loss of a relationship, a loss of a loved one. Grief has very physiological components, and physiological components affect ADHD. But I just want to know how normal this is, that you might feel this angry, sad if you get a late diagnosis, and you have to go through it, and you will come out the other side if you follow this reality. The other piece I want to bring up real quick about, in addition to grief, is that I just want to quickly touch upon other points where ADHD symptoms often really fire up for women. And this is puberty, postpartum, and menopause. So in puberty, you have fluctuating estrogen levels can disrupt the dopamine regulation, lead to the impulse control, emotional regulation difficulties, and attention difficulties. And then in postpartum, the dramatic drop in estrogen and progesterone levels after childbirth, combined with the stress and sleep deprivation, often worsen ADHD symptoms like focus, memory, and emotional regulation. And then in menopause, more declining estrogen levels, further reduced dopamine availability, exacerbating difficulties with focus and memory and emotional regulation. So it's, again, physiological. So today I'm just going to wrap. So I'm going to wrap up. Today we've talked about the royal we. I've talked about tips for getting things out of your head on paper, acknowledging what you did get done today, getting the apps and notifications on your phone, off your phone, and getting grayscale on your phone, breaking down tasks, body doubling, and motivation coming after the action for ADHD people. And the biggest key of all, in my opinion, for ADHD mind management, especially for executive and entrepreneurial women, but any moms, it's really for anyone. What am I talking about? Especially for us, just the biggest key in ADHD mind management is being honest with yourself, accepting your reality. I cannot speak about that anymore, truly. If you want to continue this community of people who get it, I am starting a new Facebook group. You'll get the link in my follow up email to this masterclass. It's called ADHD Women Peak Performance Facebook group. There will be weekly tips for ADHD success, productivity hacks, tools for managing emotions, etc. Bi-weekly mini live questions and answers where I'll answer one ADHD related question. I'll answer some questions from this in that group as well. Monthly challenges, peer support, and then we have, if you would like deeper opportunity than that for managing, you can join the ADHD coaching program, the Peak Performance ADHD Women Peak Performance ADHD coaching program, which consists of the above plus 15 to 20 minute live and recorded workshops on about half the time of this or less on specific concrete topics per week: planning, decision making, frameworks, procrastination, nervous system regulation, nutrition, color calendaring for ADHD, etc. Monthly 30-minute one-to-one calls with me to troubleshoot a specific challenge, custom GPTs created by me for ADHD management. It's so helpful. I didn't get into the GPT thing, but it's just so useful. Discounts on adjacent practitioner services, and access to all recordings of past workshops, calls, templates, tools, etc. I also have a one-on-one program, 10 weeks, one-to-one sessions with me every other week. We'll delve into specifics of your life, where the breaks in the systems are, and breaks in your habits are, your brand of life, and find your brand of clarity and ADHD management. 24 access to ask questions, no comments. I don't answer 24 hours a day, but you can get access. And then I do have one-off anytime focus accelerator now sessions, I call them, for anyone. Just you have a specific thing, an hour session, we'll delve into that and figure it out. So thank you again for your time, and I'm so glad that you came today. I'll see you hopefully in the new Facebook community soon. Bye.